The Sports Source is brought to you by Fast Frame, with exciting Vol sports prints now available.
This is The Sports Source, presented by Bill Hotz and Associates, and by Renewal by Andersen, with your host, John Pennington.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into The Sports Source, presented by Renewal by Andersen today. Tennessee gets through an ugly, there's no other way to put it, it's ugly. Butch Jones called it unacceptable. Said it 3 times, I think was the word he used. Tennessee gets by UMass 17-13. We'll talk a little bit about that, more than I thought we'd be talking about that. We'll also talk about the state of Tennessee. We'll talk about buyout numbers. We'll also talk about Georgia and what the heck that could turn into. So it's hard to tell week to week, game to game. I mean, a week ago, Mississippi State looked like gangbusters. Yesterday, they looked awful against Georgia. So you can't put too much into a single game, but is it becoming a pattern with UT at this point? Let's get right into today's show. This segment brought to you by, of course, Renewal by Andersen. No company in America has a better reputation for windows and doors than Renewal by Andersen. And right now, through September 30th, you can get free installation on those windows and doors, plus no interest payments for 12 months. That's the best quality at the best price. That's Renewal by Andersen. Go check them out. They got a showroom right in Bearden. Renewal by Andersen. They're a big part of why we're doing this show today and why we've been doing it for many, many years. So thank them for us by going out there. All right. I want to welcome in the first wave of panelists. We have Bob Hodge, Will Overstreet, Jimmy Himes, Daniel Hood, and of course these two fellas here are both VFLs. That would be Will and Daniel, not Bob and Jimmy. Although you were a Vol for a semester.
I was Vol for about 6 months.
Vol for 6 months, that's good. All right. As we start with our 2 headlines from yesterday, the first one is Bloffense. Tennessee scored just 17 points. They only had 319 yards of total offense. They had 391 yards in punting yards. So you out-punted your offense yesterday. The Vols had just 58 yards in the second half, averaged 1.8 yards per play in the second half. They needed a 3rd and 3 to seal the victory, and they couldn't pick it up. Guys, has the offense become a bigger concern than the defense, which was the big worry after Georgia Tech and coming into the season? Now suddenly, is it the offense where they're in the most trouble?
You know, you and I had the conversation yesterday. If you could replace your offensive line or your defensive line, which before the season started, everybody would have said, oh, keep the offensive line, replace defensive line. After they played yesterday, yeah, I think it's a slightly bigger concern. I think you're concerned about both of them going forward when you look at who's on the schedule.
Right, yeah.
But, yes, I'm going to go with right now your offense because I thought that would be what would be keeping your defense in games. You'd be able to score and move the ball.
Thoughts on this offense not living up to what people expected?
Your offensive line yesterday just absolutely played the worst game it's played in a long time. It made UMass's defensive line, especially their defensive ends on pass rush, look like All-Americans and All-Pro guys. Just frankly, they were getting whipped from start to finish. If it wasn't one guy getting whipped, you had 2 or 3 guys getting whipped at the same time on that offensive line yesterday.
And I don't want to pick on one guy, but Ja'Shawn Robertson was out at center, and suddenly they can't run the ball. They have had halves where they didn't run it well so far, but in each game they've had one segment where they just ran it no problem. And yesterday they really never had that. And with Robertson out, you wonder, they had no inside run game yesterday. So I think once again it goes back to Coleman Thomas there at center. Your guys' thoughts on the offense?
Well, I thought UMass did a nice job of stunning and stemming, and Tennessee didn't do a very good job picking it up. John Kelly, 11 carries, 21 yards the second half. I'm really worried about the offense. I don't see an offensive line that's nearly as good as I thought. And I'm starting to see an offense that looks a whole lot like Justin Worley back at quarterback, because I don't think Dormady fits this offense, and I don't know if they're willing to change it enough to fit their scheme to his talents. He is not the runner I thought he would be, and I think they're going to get bogged down a lot running this offense unless they change it quite a bit.
When I see this team, I worry about what type of leadership you have, because again, Ja'Shawn Robertson goes out, who's obviously the leader of that O-line, and they're not able to get the run game going. And then, of course, when you watch the Florida game, when you go in and you watch the film, you see a lot of checks and audibles that should be made to get out of run plays to check different things. And I worry that he doesn't have the ability to, or the coaches hadn't taken the handcuffs off in order to change it. And so then you're just running into a brick wall every single time. And so I want to see more of that.
And it just, UMass really had to read them right, because at times they shifted their entire defensive line from the center over and knew Dormady is not going to take this ball. You saw them, and I really, on Jimmy's threat, that if they continue to run this offense and Dormady cannot show that he can pull down and create some kind of yardage, they're going to continue to see defenses shift their entire game plan against just stopping the run and slight cutbacks.
And go ahead.
I was going to say a quick stat. Tennessee had 18 runs of 2 or fewer yards, and 8 of them were negative running plays.
I may have different numbers, but we're going to be close later on in the show. Same kind of thing. You know, the other thing is there were times when UMass had stacked the box, and you're still not throwing over it. Yeah. I mean, if we all say, well, Dormady would be much better in a different offense. I'm not willing to go there yet. I know people are saying that. I'm not saying he's a good fit for this offense, but if he doesn't become a better passer, I don't know what offense he would thrive in. Because if they're stacking the box like that, you should at least be able, in an RPO, to complete a pass and burn them over the top and bake them back out of there. But you're not doing that either. So that's a concern.
Well, your offensive line is getting whipped pretty quick up front, too, when you do go into a passing play. I mean, they are getting beat on the first move by a defensive end back there free and clear.
Yesterday. And that had not been the case the first 3 games, though, for the entire game. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Something changed yesterday. I don't know that it's all, it's because Dormady doesn't run. Well, you think, then how did they have a great second half against Florida? So I think that's part of it. I also think your offensive line, you had one guy out yesterday, and suddenly your offensive line looks like crap. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think you really need Ja'Shawn Robertson out there.
I think a hangover had something to do with it, too.
Let's get into that. Here we go. Part number 2. Jimmy playing producer today. The hangover. All right. Heartbreaking loss last week. We talked about this on our Fox show Saturday. And by the way, you should go ahead and set your DVR every Saturday at 10:30 on Fox 43. We do a pregame show. And we talked about the fact that Tennessee had the heartbreaking loss, a week of media and fan insults, a noon kickoff against an 0-4 team. An 0-4 team, by the way, that has now played 4 straight SEC teams into the fourth quarter. UMass has 3 last year and 1 this year. We've seen Tennessee have these kind of struggles with previous coaches in the past, in Northern Illinois or something, Memphis years ago. These kind of things can crop up from time to time. But terrible timing for Butch Jones to have this happen going off that Florida thing. But how much can we really say, put this on the hangover?
I'm going to go with a little bit more than some other people might. And that's not a defense of Butch Jones, but I think if you're Tennessee and you're out there, this is not an exciting opponent. It's not. If you had played a little in-state school, Tennessee Martin or somebody, you might have had a little bit more interest from players. This is a team from way out of your region. They're 0-4, and then everybody before that game is probably still thinking, wow, if we had just knocked that last pass down, if we'd have done this, we'd have done that. So I'm going to say a lot of hangover involved in this.
Let me get Jimmy next. Give me about 30 seconds in terms of how much do you put on the hangover?
I put a lot on it, and I went back to 2009 going forward, and I found what I consider to be 8 devastating losses for Tennessee. And the next week, and I'm talking about after an open date, the next week they were 2-6. The wins were over Western Carolina and Tennessee Tech. So I thought they'd have a hangover. I didn't know it would be this big of one, though.
Daniel, you said before the game that you thought they'd come out sharp. They would want to make somebody pay for the pain at Florida. Okay, you were wrong.
I was wrong.
But what does that tell you, though? The fact that you were wrong about it, does that concern you?
It doesn't, because I think as a player you have practices and you have games every single time that's just for whatever reason you can't get it going. And I think it's just, complete irony that you got Mack Brown talking about the Clemson-Boston College game where Clemson's up 7-0 at the half. He literally makes a statement. You cannot get them up to play every single game. Sometimes you got to win ugly games, but I think the key point there is you still win the game. You still got the win, and your defense did, able to close them out, which they should have at UMass. Okay. But get the win and go on.
All right, Will, I'll start with you in the next segment. We'll move on from there. Tennessee is 3-1. Doesn't feel like it in this town. We'll discuss that. One writer says that the Georgia game should be Butch Jones' last chance to prove himself, or else we'll discuss. Do the guys here agree? And what was with the use of the quarterbacks? Going back on the Sports Source.